Hello, I'm Bruno Turkley, and this session's about installing and configuring Big Little Challenge inside of Kubernetes, inside of the Azure Container Service. So again, my name's Bruno Turkley, work for Microsoft, and I'm going to take you on a little tour on how to get this not very trivial application up and running in Kubernetes. So this is the portal. Let's take a quick peek at my Kubernetes cluster that I've already deployed here, and it's under my Kubernetes resource group 3 here. So this has got the infrastructure that we're going to deploy into. Notice it's got 3 agent VMs and 1 master VM. Another thing to consider, you're going to do your work from a Linux VM here, to build out and kind of configure this cluster. One of the things you'll want to do is install some of the tooling here, one of which is the Python tooling. And in some previous videos I talked about, and perhaps we'll review that here, is how I install things like kube control and the configuration file which enables my Linux VM to communicate with this cluster. So let's dive in and take a look at some of these things. So this is a Big Little Challenge here in Ross Gardler's repo. He's the PM on the Azure Container Service. He's got an interesting little game here. It's a card game with an artificial intelligence player. So it's got 3 components. A dashboard, kind of displays the status of the game. It's got an AI player, which is kind of a fictitious opponent in the card game. And then, of course, we've got the players themselves. So those are reflected here in the Kubernetes folder. We're going to be playing with some of these files. You can see some of them, the AI player, the dashboard, and then the card engine itself. So those are the 3 main pillars. Let's get into that. So from an architecture point of view, we're going to be viewing the dashboard GUI, and there's going to be communications going on between the engine and the player, simulating a real card game. Okay, so let's take a closer look at getconfig.sh. What that's going to do is going to retrieve the configuration file from our cluster. The reason we need this configuration file is that it allows us to really effectively connect up to the cluster. And here you can see the command. Essentially, we're kind of identifying the service name and the resource group of our cluster. And this command here, AZACS Kubernetes, let me zoom that up a little bit, is going to retrieve the config file and put it in the .cube folder. And then over here, this CP command, we're going to copy here to the current folder. So let's go ahead and run this command, bash get config. And then when we do an ls-ltr for the config file, you will notice we just downloaded it here. So at any rate, this is an important file. It has a lot of the information regarding security so that we can actually do a communication with the master node of our ACS Kubernetes cluster. So that's the purpose of this. So the first thing we're going to do is export some environment variables here. So if you look over here, we have a command here called export kubeconfig, and then this pwd retrieves the current directory and then appends config. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now if I say echo $kubeconfig, you'll see that it points to this folder here, the config folder specifically, which is where we have the config file. So that brings us to one of the next commands we want to do, which is to download the kubectl utility, and we need that because that's the way we communicate with the cluster. It's kind of 3 pieces here: the kubeconfig environment variable, the kubectl utility, and then this config file, which we also have to download. So let's do the rest of these 2. A quick peek will show you that it actually put it in the bin directory, so now it's available for execution, as I mentioned a moment ago. So let's go ahead and get the config file, which we'll need here. So if I do show you this command, it shows that once again we're going to go to this resource group, which is the Kubernetes cluster in ACS, and I do this get credentials command. It's going to execute correctly these configuration files that need to be downloaded. So let's go ahead now and do just that. I'm going to go ahead and say bash get config, and now we're going to see that indeed we have a config file. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you that file. There it is, just downloaded. Okay, so now we're actually ready to start talking to the cluster. So kubectl get pods, and you can see we have some stuff already running up in the cluster from a previous run. We're going to basically clear all that out and start from scratch in this demo.